Hi, this is Kevin Colton. I just retired from Hobart William Smith Colleges after 23 years, and we're having this huge event. If you haven't heard about an eclipse by now, you need to come out from under the rock you're in and get ready, because Monday's not very far away. So the eclipse will happen on April 8th. It's going to begin here in Geneva around 2:07 p.m. It will end at 4:34 p.m. and it will be at its maximum at 3:22, and it will last a whole 2 minutes 21 seconds of totality of darkness. But the whole thing takes about 2.5 hours to go through the process. So you got to have everything ready to go when that 2 minutes 21 seconds hits, because you're not going to have a lot of time to make adjustments when you get to that point. So there's going to be some safety features we're going to talk about. The easiest way to explain why you need a filter on your camera or your binoculars or your telescope or your smartphone is the fact that we all remember as a kid where you hold a magnifying glass up to the sun and you can set things on fire. And a camera lens, a telescope lens, all those types of things act just as a magnifying glass does. So consider the lens being whatever you're shooting through, and the piece of paper that's going to catch on fire is the back of your eye. So that's the biggest safety tip, and the reason they're saying that you need to have some type of filter on anything that when you're viewing the eclipse. So the most common method is solar eclipse glasses. There's 3 certifications to them. Any of them are fine. Very, very few glasses that are out there right now that are not certified. We're getting toward the time where you might start to have a little trouble finding them online, but most places that are holding events have the viewing glasses that are available when you get there. I know we will have some here at HWS, and most of the other places that I've talked to will also have them available for you. But try to get them ahead of time just to be sure, because you are going to need them. Here's the important thing. Sunglasses are not solid enough. They are not dense enough to view the eclipse. The only time that you could possibly use sunglasses is during that 2 minutes and 22 seconds. During the time that it's at its total eclipse is the only time ever that it's safe to look at this. But you got to know when it starts to peek out from either side, because that's the sun, and we all know we don't look at the sun. The glasses are the best viewing. There's other ways to do it. In this slide, it's a dish strainer and a specific spoon that has holes in it. But if you hold anything like that up and let it project onto the ground or your hand or whatever, you will see the exact phase that the eclipse is in at that time. Something really cool to look for is at total eclipse, if it's very sunny, to look under trees, because the leaves act in the same way, and you'll have all these little half-moon shapes all over the sidewalks and all over the ground. You can also make a pinhole viewer, like shown here. It's just a shoebox. At one end, there's aluminum foil with just a really small pinhole in it. On the far end of the box is a piece of white paper, like typing paper, copy paper, and then you cut a hole next to where you have your tinfoil, and you can look through that, hold it over your shoulder. The sun will project through the pinhole and onto the far side to the white paper, and you can view it without any issues at all. If you have a telescope or binoculars, you'll be able to use just a piece of white paper or something solid to project the image of what phase it's in at the time onto that white board. They suggest you put a larger piece of cardboard around the telescope and things as a collar, just because you want to block as much sun so you have the darkest image on the paper that you're viewing with. These are the do nots, and it's very, very simple. Don't look at anything through any type of a viewfinder, a lens, whether it be binoculars, telescope, camera, smartphone. And you don't want to point any of the optics that aren't filtered at the Eclipse itself. And you definitely do not want to look at it without wearing some of the solar eclipse glasses that you have. And you need to even have those on most of the time that you're trying to set up and look through your viewfinder, because you still have to hold it up and look toward the sun to get an image of what you have. You can use the back of, once you have a filter on a camera, you can use the back LED screen to be able to see your image and focus and things like that with it. So if you're going to take pictures with a DSLR or some type of camera, you're going to need stuff to have it ready to go. Eclipse glasses, of course, you need a camera. You got to put it on a tripod. I suggest a cable release so that you're not touching the camera during the exposure, and a solar filter. And the lenses should be the longest focal length that you can find, because that way you get a bigger image on your sensor and you don't have to crop in as much. You'll be able to use the image as is. I will be photographing it with a 400 millimeter lens that has a filter to the front, and it's still pretty small on the viewfinder, but will crop in without too much of a problem. So the longest lens focal length that you can find is what you want to use. So for the camera settings, the first is your ISO, and solar filters actually are dense enough that they drop the light source down to about 100,000 times less than what you can see. So your ISO setting can be fairly low because the sun is so bright. So I recommend you start at 200 ISO, and you may need to try a few out before the eclipse itself. I suggest putting your filter on your camera, going out on a nice day in the next few days, and just try taking some pictures with the sun to see what you're getting for an exposure. And it's going to be pretty much the same on Monday as it is most any other day. Also, in your camera settings, you're going to want to set your aperture. The best settings fall between f8 and f16, and basically that has nothing to do with depth of field, but it has to do with the brightness of the sun. So I would start somewhere maybe around f11, and again 200 ISO. And the shutter speed, you can set it fairly fast. Say start out at 125th of a second. You shouldn't use a shutter speed slower than 8 seconds due to the Earth's rotation. It will not be a sharp image, and you will have a trail as the sun and the Earth move. And so you want to keep it up fairly high. I recommend 125th to start with. You may be faster depending on what you decide to use for your aperture and your ISO. But try it all out ahead of time and make sure everything does what it should do. You're going to determine your focus for infinity. And the way that I do this is you need to do this, of course, in a bright sunny day. I look at the farthest object that I can find, even with a telephoto, and then I basically tape the focus in place. You can, with the screen, focus as you look at the sun before it starts, but I recommend taping the focus, putting some tape on the focus ring so that it doesn't change during the time that and then you don't have to fuss with it, during the actual event. So zoom lenses we talked about, 300 millimeter works well to shoot an eclipse, but the longer the focal length, the larger the image that you'll have on your sensor, the less cropping you have to do, the better image you're going to be able to create. And you want to shoot all of these in camera raw, so that you have the most information collected to the sensor that you can come up with. So now a lot of people are going to use a smartphone. So the same safety measures as a DSLR fall into place. Don't look through the lens. Don't let it sit onto your sensor without a filter. All of this can and probably will damage the smartphone camera itself. The biggest thing about a smartphone is that you have to manage your expectations, is the fact that you're shooting with a smartphone. Today's smartphones are awesome. They got great quality. Everything seems to work well, but you're still using a phone, and it's not going to replicate the details that you get with a DSLR or a high quality lens. But you will be able to get very good photos with your smartphone. So with the smartphone, you're still going to need Eclipse glasses, and you're going to probably, I would recommend using a tripod, even the small ones, so that you don't, the less movement you have, the better. You can put one of the clip-on telephoto lenses on there, or they do make solar filters for smartphones. The tripod part of it is going to be, you're going to want to use a timer so that you set it for like 2-second timer before it takes the image, 4 seconds, and you push that and then you step away from it on a tripod, or just don't have your hands anywhere near it, and let the vibration that occurs during the time you push the button settle out so you still get a sharper image. So you got to find in your settings, even on a smartphone, you want to shoot in RAW. RAW is the most information that any camera can collect onto the sensor. So once you have all of that data, you've got a much sharper image, you've got more detail to work with. I recommend that you don't zoom in. If you're not using a telephoto lens, you want to zoom in, but doing it will lead to a lower resolution and more pixels in the photo. You're better off with most of these to go somewhere in the middle, or keep it at the one lens that you have, that you would shoot normally if you were taking a picture of a person or taking a picture of whomever. So there are programs out there. You can find an app that lets you control your exposure settings. So you can do the same thing you did with a DSLR. You can control your ISO, you can control your shutter, and you can control your speed of the image itself that you take, or basically the shutter speed. Some of these are Solar Snap, which I have and will be using. ProShot, I have looked into and ran a demo, and it works very well. Manual camera works well. These are the 4 that I recommend. And Pro Camera is one that I have on my phone all the time. And this app allows you to make those, all 4 of these actually allow you to make those changes as you get ready to take the picture. And just like the DSLR, you need to go out and try it before Monday. So you don't want it to be a last minute kind of thing. Know your settings, know what you're going to have to change, know what you're going to have to do. Some of these apps you do have to pay for, but you'll use them for so many other things like sunset photos. And once you get used to using them, it's nice to have the complete control of the light that hits the sensor, even on a cell phone. So they do make solar filters just for cell phones. Solar Snap makes one that you basically fasten over the lenses on your smartphone, and so does VizSolar makes one. These are the only 2 that I really found that are big enough to cover the entire 3 lenses on most of the cameras today. You'll see when you get, just like your glasses, you can barely see through it, but when you point to the sun, you're going to see how well they work. But these are the 2 that will fit over all of the lenses. But as most people, the easiest way to do this is do it yourself. If you find a pair of solar glasses, basically you cut them in the middle, and you can use that filter over the front of your cell phone lenses, your smartphone lenses. And the thing I found with this is it's usually not big enough to cover, like on the iPhones, with all 3 lenses. So you got to determine which of those lenses, when you take your photos, just hold your finger over one, take a picture, see which one it is that it's using, and you want to cover the other the other two with some type of a dark paper. But you just fasten that solar filter from the glasses right over the camera lens, and it will work as all those other filters do that you have that covers all three lenses. But it's the easiest, cheapest, least expensive way to go. And there's quite a few glasses out there, so you shouldn't have trouble finding them at a late date. So we have other things coming up. Of course, we have the total eclipse on April 8th, what's called an annular eclipse October 2nd, which will be mostly in the Midwest, and that is when they call it the Ring of Fire, where the moon is close enough to the Earth that it doesn't cover the entire sun when it passes in front. So you get just a ring around, and I'll show you a picture of the most recent one. And we'll have a partial eclipse on March 29th of 2025, a year from now. We've had a few of those around here that people have seen, and we will have just a partial, kind of looks like a half moon, quarter moon type of a thing. And then also the type of eclipse we're going to have a lunar eclipse of the moon. It will be partial on September 18th. When it's a full lunar eclipse, it's what people call the blood moon, where the Earth blocks the light going directly to the moon, which is a reflective surface, and gives it kind of this red glow as the sun comes around the Earth and lights the moon that way instead of directly. So when I retired, one of the things people asked me is what I was going to do, and I don't think I would have said at that time that I would be standing in the middle of the desert staring at the sun. But that's what I did. I've been lucky enough to see a few solar eclipse and lunar eclipse and photograph them, and it's a pretty awesome sight when you see it. So in 2017 we had a total eclipse. I went to Missouri where you could see it. It was going to be this is what you will see here on Monday the 8th. This is a total solar eclipse, and over the period of times, these images are probably about every maybe 20-25 minutes that makes up this composite. A close-up, you can see the flare of the sun around the moon, and this is a little different than what I'm going to show you in a couple minutes, but you'll see the actual flare of the sun. So one of the questions I was asked is it going to be bright orangey yellow? And it's probably not. It's going to be more white. A lot of times it's either the filter that you use if you want to make it more color to it, or you can make that adjustment in post processing when you have it. But this is pretty much what it will look like through your camera. So in 2021, we had a partial eclipse. I went to Lake Ontario to Sodas Point to photograph it. Pretty cool. This is where it's not a total eclipse, but in our area we got to see part of it. This is what most of the country will see on Monday, unless you're in the path of totality. These happen a little more often. You don't have to travel to see them. You know, there'll be some at some point coming through. I keep seeing things that say it's a once in a lifetime experience, and I'm realizing that I've seen like 3. So I don't know if I'm really old or whether you're going to get out there and travel and go see them also. 2021, we had a lunar eclipse here, the blood moon, where the Earth blocked the light to the moon, giving it that red tint. So you can kind of see, this is with Cox Hall here on the campus. This happened around 1 a.m. In the morning. So this is a photo of the close-up of that same lunar eclipse in 2021. You can see that the sun is still catching the bottom left of the moon. The thing with lunar eclipse is you don't need a filter to photograph the moon because it is reflected light and not direct light, and it is not as bright as you will have during the solar eclipse. So these are things that you can still do with your phones without a filter. And those lunar eclipses happen quite often. So, it's not just this one eclipse that you got to have in mind when you're ready to set everything up. So this is the latest one that I went to. This was October 14th of 2023. This is an annular eclipse. This was in Monument Valley that I went out to Utah. and you can see that the moon does not completely cover the sun. So doesn't make it a total eclipse, but makes it what they call the ring of fire, where you have that complete ring around the moon of the sun as it goes through the phases. Again, this is about every 20 to 25 minutes for these exposures. In a close-up, you can see the difference between that and when you could see the solar flare, which it was still dark. Some of the things to expect, it got so much colder out in the desert where we were when it reached this phase. That will happen here. You start to hear all the things like peepers and crickets and birds that normally just fly at night start, and then they realize night only lasted 2 minutes. So it's pretty cool. You don't get to see this. This is definitely something you want to see, and there's a lot of people that are going to be lined up with you, and just enjoy. That's what we have for Monday, April 8th, and have a good time. Enjoy. Be safe. Remember to use a filter on everything, and you should be good to go.